tonight is the 2025 Spellman Oratorical Contest, and the theme tonight is Nature versus Nurture, the making of a hero or villain in literature and art. I would like to thank you and welcome you. The Oratorical was created in honor of Ellen Conway Spellman of Whitman, the mother of Francis Cardinal Spellman. This year, $4,500 in scholarship money will be awarded to participants. Francis Galton said, "Nature is all that a man brings with him into the world. Nurture is every influence that affects him after his birth." This year's prompt asked all seniors to explore whether an individual's character and fate are determined by inherent traits or shaped by their environment and experiences. Through literature and art, they were asked to analyze how heroes and villains are portrayed, examining whether their virtues and flaws stem from innate qualities or external influences. They were asked to reflect upon how these two sides of a character enlighten audiences about essential aspects of humanity. The rules for the contest are as follows. The title of the original essay will be given to senior students, and the subject matter will be changed yearly. Names of the contestants will be unknown to the judges. Essays must be between 500 and 1,000 words. Sources of all quoted material must be cited. The following qualities are used for basis of judging: delivery, content, diction, and poise. Prize money is awarded at the discretion of the judges. There are suggested amounts, but these can be changed by the judges if there's a tie. First place, $1,250. Second place, $1,050. Third place, $750. Fourth, $550. And fifth, $300. And a tie, usually for 6th, 7th, and 8th in no particular order, at $200 each. At this time, I would like to introduce our distinguished panel of judges. Stephen Weisgerber is a 1978 graduate of Rockland High School. Mr. Weisgerber has an undergraduate degree from Brandeis University and a master's degree from Bridgewater State University. He's taught history and social studies throughout his career and currently works as a teacher, department head, National Honor Society advisor, and basketball coach at Marshfield High School. Thanks for coming tonight. Karen Vaughn is a lawyer in a private practice with an office in Whitman. She graduated from Suffolk University Law in 1985, Dartmouth College in 1982, majoring in history and comparative literature. She was on the debate team in both high school and college and competed at the national level. Karen is an RHS class of 78 grad and a proud Bulldog. Thank you, Karen. Caitlin Unizzi is a 4th grade teacher at East Elementary School in Hingham, where she's been known to teach everything from multiplication to the occasional impromptu lesson in how to survive a cat's judgmental stare. After graduating from Rockland High School in 2016, she went on to earn a degree in early childhood education and psychology and a master's in education from Stonehill College. When she's not in the classroom, you'll find her at home with her 5 cats, each of whom is named after one of her favorite literary characters. Because why have one literary hero when you can have 5? Thank you, Caitlin. My name's Kristen Walsh. I am the AP Literature teacher at Rockland High School currently. I would also like to take a moment to thank the following administrators and teachers, faculty members for their attendance tonight. Principal Cheryl Schipper, English Department Chair Kendra Donovan, English teacher Amanda McDonough, Science teacher Caitlin Diver, and Business teacher Mr. Laurie. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And we would all like to thank the staff and support from WRPS for filming tonight. So Chris Pernica, Lisa Breeden, and Seth Rzuski, thank you very much. This will eventually be it's recorded tonight and it'll be broadcast on WRPS YouTube fairly soon, so you'll be able to find it there or share it with friends and family. Finally, it's my privilege to introduce the contestants. They'll be competing in the random order that they've been selected. I'm just going to introduce them as they come up by first name to keep the anonymity for the judges. So up first, we have Jax.
Throughout time, the debate over whether heroes and villains are born or made has always remained a central question, often discussed through literature and art. Are individuals inherently more likely to become good or evil, or do their environments and experiences mold who they'll eventually become? This ongoing discussion, often called the nature versus nurture debate, explores whether an individual character is predisposed to a specific outcome or if their external influences make them who they are. Literature provides compelling examples of both perspectives, displaying how a combination of genetic predispositions and life circumstances shape heroes and villains. Through the lens of characters in literature and film, insight is given into how the forces of nature and nurture influence moral choices and personal growth, and how these characters shape their respective worlds. It is the very complex combination of both nurture and nature that shapes these iconic characters into who they'll eventually become, this often referred to in the psychology world as nature via nurture. In Mary Shelley's 1818 novel, Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, a scientist with big dreams of transforming society and bringing about glory to himself through scientific achievement, is a prime example of unchecked ambition and great intelligence. These traits he obtained by nature, as it seems, both eventually leading to his self-sabotage. However, it is ultimately isolation and lack of ethical guidance that will lead to Victor playing God and creating life, all examples of outside influence. The monstrous creation that is Frankenstein serves as a living reminder of the consequence of nurture gone wrong. The creature, however initially benevolent and even described as childlike, becomes a villain due to rejection and abandonment. In this way, it is proven how both nurture and nature can contribute to moral development. While Victor's intellectual arrogance is innate, it is emotional apathy and lack of responsibility that will doom him. The actions of the characters in the novel reinforce that neither nature nor nurture alone determines an individual's fate, but rather the complex interplay between the two. J. Gatsby's rise and fall in F. Scott Fitzgerald's 1925 novel, The Great Gatsby, demonstrates how insatiable ambition and longing for an idealized past can both prove heroic and self-destructive. James Gatz, born into poverty, possesses a natural charisma and determination that will eventually drive him to reinvent himself as Jay Gatsby. His ability to dream beyond his current circumstances suggests an inherent quality of optimism and ambition. It is his environment, specifically his exposure to wealth, and the illusion of the American dream that shapes his tragic future. Furthermore, his pursuit of Daisy Buchanan is built by his desire for her, but is also a byproduct of the societal pressures and values that tie success, the materialism, and consumerism as a whole. Gatsby remains a sympathetic character despite his illegal dealings and unachievable dream, because his dreams are driven by an idealistic love. Fitzgerald's novel provides new perspective to the debate despite Gatsby's traits seeming natural. It is ultimately the influence of the outside characters that will cause his demise. Will Hunting, the protagonist of the 1997 film Good Will Hunting, is a very compelling example of the nature versus nurture debate expressed through pop culture. Naturally, Will is a bona fide genius, with the ability to solve complex math problems with ease. He possesses a photographic memory, and his intellect exceeds that of everyone around him. This raw intelligence represents the nature side of the debate, exemplified through Will. It is, however, his traumatic upbringing growing up in South Boston and experiencing abuse in foster homes that shapes his behavior and emotional outlook. Constantly being surrounded by instability is what will eventually create a life-altering moral dilemma. Will's genius doesn't automatically translate into success or happiness. Instead, he hides behind anger, sarcasm, and fear of intimacy, all examples of defense mechanisms. His natural gifts are suppressed by years of emotional neglect and self-preservation. The film suggests that while nature may gift somebody with an extraordinary ability, it is nurture, love, guidance, and emotional healing that determines whether those abilities can flourish. Through his relationship with his therapist, Sean, and his growing trust in others, Will begins to confront his past and imagine a different future. In doing so, Good Will Hunting makes a compelling case that nurture has the power to not only damage but also heal. And overcoming one's environment is often key to unlocking one's natural potential. Art reveals that human nature isn't inherently good nor villainous. Rather, it's shaped by the duality of innate qualities and environmental influence. These characters suggest specific examples of how a seemingly moral character is not flat, but ever-changing and influenced by circumstance, experience, and decision-making. Victor Frankenstein, James Gatz, along with the film character Will Hunting, all serve as examples of how ambition, isolation, can create the situation for a character's demise. It is through these stories that characters reflect upon the broader experience that is life, reminding audiences of the lasting impact that both nurture and nature play into the foundation of one's personality. By doing so, audiences are encouraged to reflect upon their own lives and the everlasting impacts of environments and morality. Ultimately, the nature versus nurture debate continues to offer insight into the meaning of life and the human condition. Thank you.
The judges could just give me a thumbs up when they're ready. Up next, we have Kat.
The long-standing question of what influences people more, their genetics or their environment, has been depicted countless times in art, literature, or just plain human history. Whether it's through the story's villain or hero, they all have a driving force. All of these stories collectively illustrate that there isn't just one authority over people. Characters in these stories are both virtuous and flawed simultaneously, which further explores the mosaic that is human nature. However, an individual's character and fate ultimately come down to genetics. Louisa May Alcott's 1868 novel, Little Women, follows the lives of 4 sisters who were all raised the same way, in the same house, by the same mother, yet they display wildly different identities and values throughout their lives. By exhibiting these contrasting personalities that emerge from the same upbringing, the girls' individual natures are highlighted. Amy and Jo, the sisters known for their headstrong determination in each of their different art forms, which leads them to clash over and over again throughout the novel, even though they unknowingly want very similar things. They both represent ambition and the desire to achieve greatness. Meanwhile, Meg and Beth represent more traditional, quiet roles, like Meg's desire to marry and have children. As children, they were each exposed to pure love thanks to their parents, encouraging the natural need humans have for connection and attachment. This demonstrates how one can nurture something natural, like Jo's ultimate need for connection later in her life, but cannot change it entirely, cementing its permanence and influence in one's life. Amy, ever the realist, always knew she would have to marry, that there was simply no other option for a woman during her time, but that does not mean she wouldn't try to become something great in the meantime. Traveling overseas and pursuing her art, but never getting caught up in the delusion that Jo suffered from. That infatuation with independence and becoming a writer infects Jo and causes her to push away Laurie, seeing love as an illness to her goals. Jo's abrasiveness to marriage and love becomes ironic when she does eventually settle and marry, just like Amy does. She comes to this decision once she feels she has completed her initial goals of writing and publishing, demonstrating how a person's nature is fickle but still in control. Early on in the novel, when the 4 sisters and Laurie are sharing their dreams and hopes for the future, Beth simply states that she wishes to stay at home with her mother and father forever. Amy wishes to go to Rome and become the finest artist in the world. Meanwhile, Jo securely states, "I want to do something splendid before I go into my castle. Something heroic or wonderful that won't be forgotten after I'm dead." She is quickly met with snide remarks and petulant discouragement from her sisters about her absurd idea. However, Jo's enthusiastic fight for what she believes in from a young age demonstrates her innate belief that women are meant to be recognized for more than just their beauty and domestic skills, ultimately valuing intelligence and ambition above all else. This demonstrates how environment, circumstances, or external relationship influences cannot change a person's essential qualities that they were born with. Both Amy and Jo are considered villainous at different times for certain choices they made. For example, Amy burning Jo's manuscript or Jo's powerful jealousy of Amy going to Europe instead of her. But there was virtually no reason for the girls to be upset with each other because of their environment. They belonged to a loving home with no trauma or devastating hardships, highlighting that what they did to each other was just their natural reactions caused by their characteristics. Ultimately, the March sisters demonstrate how even when people are raised the same way, they will still turn out differently from each other, thanks to their inherent congenital qualities. Another established example of nature outweighing nurture is displayed in Madeline Miller's 2011 novel, The Song of Achilles. This modern reimagination of the Greek myth, both Achilles and Patroclus were raised together since childhood and trained concurrently for battle. However, this important external factor did not in any way influence Patroclus's kind and calm nature or Achilles' naturally militant and sanctimonious qualities. Iphigenia, daughter of a commander in the Trojan War, tells Patroclus, "He is a weapon, a killer, do not forget it. You can use a spear as a walking stick, but that will not change its nature." She is referring to Achilles, and how, while he may be used for benign domestic purposes like the spear being used as a walking stick, his fundamental violent nature remains unchanged, showing how people can be used for different reasons like tools, but their inner identity is always present. Similarly, Achilles' companion Patroclus, who eventually grew into himself and developed his combative confidence, was somewhat influenced by his harsh, rigid upbringing with Achilles. However, his quiet courage and unending kindness remained throughout his life because that is how he was born. Until his death, he continuously offered himself for Achilles' needs. Whether it be small favors or the ultimate sacrifice that cost him his life, he was invariably willing. Patroclus proves time and time again that he loves with everything he is, that there is nothing, not even fighting in the torturous Trojan War, that could take that intrinsic quality away from him. These two characters ultimately demonstrate how people can be raised for the same gruesome purpose, at the same time, by the same person, but still turn out fiercely different, depending on their innate qualities. Through the characters in Little Women and The Song of Achilles, the authors show how a person's nature and genetics are more influential on their life than the way they were raised, and also validate this persistent issue since there is a 200-year hiatus between these two stories. Both help to close the debate on nature versus nurture. Thank you.
Up next, we have Lucy.
What if character and fate aren't predetermined but shaped by the people we meet in the interactions we experience? It has long been debated whether an individual's character is determined by the signs of who they are at birth or how they are nurtured through their environment and experiences. This idea allows us to delve deeper into how the world around us can define who we become, ultimately illustrating that every encounter and decision creates our unique path. While nurture plays a crucial role in shaping our character through factors like family, childhood, and culture, it is also essential to consider the nature aspect. Our natures, the traits we are born with, contribute to our innate characteristics. We can understand how individuality is formed by examining both nature and nurture. Nature significantly contributes to how we perceive and respond to the world, but external influences and relationships ultimately determine the person we become. Literature and art explain how our virtues and flaws collectively stem from external influences. J.D. Salinger's 1951 novel, The Catcher in the Rye, explores the life of protagonist Holden Caulfield, whose complex life story demonstrates how environmental factors create Holden's unique identity. Holden experiences trauma from a young age after the death of his brother Allie. This profoundly influences Holden's current behaviors and view of life. Holden explains, "I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all." This is an example of Holden expressing his desire to protect the children because of his past experiences. Holden wishes to keep the harsh reality of the world away from these children, which is a result of his nurturing background. Holden was unable to protect Allie from death, and now he wishes to project this protective instincts onto others, like his younger sister Phoebe. Likewise, Holden bounces from school to school because of his reckless behavior. Holden struggles to create genuine connections with his peers and develops a desire to be understood and accepted because of his upbringing. Holden's parents have an authoritarian parenting style, which means their children are meant to obey their expectations and needs. Holden's parents force him to attend boarding schools, which creates a disconnect, and they are oblivious to Holden's struggles and emotional needs. This results in Holden feeling alienated, which is why he struggles so much with making and keeping friends. The type of household you grow up in individualizes how you ultimately create your morals. For Holden, this meant viewing adults as phonies and making peace with being alone. Through Holden's journey, Salinger brings attention to how nurture shapes our identity and how it can help us navigate through life's challenges. In contrast, Harper Lee's 1960 novel To Kill a Mockingbird illustrates how a positive environment produces empathy. Scout and Jem Finch are shaped by their upbringing in Maycomb, Alabama, at a time when the town is immersed in racial discrimination and social injustice. Their father, Atticus Finch, teaches Scout and Jem how to have empathy and justice for others. Atticus's parenting style contributes to his children developing strong moral compasses. Atticus teaches Scout a lesson about empathy, further explaining that you never understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. This moment provokes the establishment of Scout's morals. Atticus wants her to create her own opinions instead of following blindly. Both of Atticus's children are developing their ideas through the nurturing environment whilst conflicting opinions surround them. However, they will benefit from living with someone who creates a positive household. There are also characters like Bob Ewell, who represent a negative parenting style. Bob and his daughter, Mayella, are symbols of the lower class in Macomb. Bob is poor, racist, and an abusive alcoholic, and Mayella is uneducated due to her need to help raise her siblings. Mayella meets a black man named Tom Robinson and is instantly attracted to him. Mayella tries to kiss him and Tom refuses, making her extremely upset. To avoid facing the consequences and protect her reputation, she falsely accuses him of raping her, leading to his trial and conviction. Whilst all of this is occurring, Mayella cultivates bright red geraniums along her fence, which symbolize beauty and hope amidst her family's difficult circumstances. These flowers reflect her longing for beauty and a better life, contrasting her harsh reality. Mayella's wish to care for the flowers symbolize the love and care she yearns for, while stuck in this life of neglect and abuse from Bob. The toxic atmosphere Bob creates for her results in Mayella feeling trapped and alone. This prevents her from developing a sense of self-worth. Atticus and Bob both represent divergent paths of humanity. Atticus embodies empathy and honesty through the nurturing environment he creates, while Bob represents ignorance and cruelty from his immoral principles. This proves that the people and environment you surround yourself with create how you treat others. Similar to J.D. Salinger, Harper Lee emphasizes how our environment shapes human behavior and the importance of understanding and empathy for others. Many argue that genetics shape character and fate more significantly than environmental factors. At birth, our genetics can decide if we are more introverted or extroverted. Additionally, our instincts and emotions can drive us to make decisions that are natural to us rather than learned, and nurture emphasizes the impact our environment has on us. A person who surrounds himself with a positive environment and engages in clubs and activity will develop more sympathetic and sociable traits, while someone who associates with negative influences will adopt similar behaviors. While genetics can contribute to developing our personality, research claims that our environmental factors have a greater determination on who we ultimately become. The unique experiences each person has shape their personality and behavior more than genetics. Thank you.
Up next, Mohammed.
The question of nature versus nurture is centuries old, first appearing in English philosopher John Locke's 1690 an essay concerning human understanding, where he proposed the concept of tabula rasa, Latin for blank slate, suggesting that individuals are born as blank slates and that knowledge and personality are written in them entirely by experience and environment, presenting a perspective emphasizing nurture over nature. However, Francis Galton, the British polymath to whom the question is accredited, argues the opposite in his 1869 book, Hereditary Genius, stating that intellectual ability, along with many other traits, is passed down genetically rather than a product of one's environmental factors. So, what determines a person's moral behavior and success in life? While people may inherit tendencies towards certain behaviors, they are not doomed nor saved by their nature. They have the capacity to choose their own morals and intellectual path. This idea is explicitly mentioned in John Steinbeck's 1952 East of Eden. One of the central themes in East of Eden is the idea of choice and free will, which the novel draws on by referencing the biblical story of Cain and Abel, presenting a metaphorical exploration of good and evil. Cain becomes jealous of Abel because God favors Abel's offers over his. Mirroring this in East of Eden, Cal and Aaron Trask are brothers, and Cal is deeply jealous of Aaron, who is more idealized by their father Adam, just like Cain was envious of Abel. However, even after this similarity, Cal wrestles with his darker impulses. Lee, an influential character and a mentor to Cal, introduces him to the idea of Timshel, which means thou mayest in Hebrew, which plays a significant role because it suggests that humans have the power to choose between good and evil, that God did not promise people heaven, nor did he choose their doom. The validity of Timshel is exemplified by the character of Cal Trask, who, although inherits much of his father's guilt, while heavily struggling with the darker impulses from his mother, undergoes a significant emotional and moral transformation through Lee's mentorship and the acceptance of his father. This idea ties into the nature versus nurture debate because Cal's story demonstrates that people can overcome or counterbalance nature's inherent traits or the flaws they inherit from their parents. However, perhaps a greater example of nurture influencing character is described in Fyodor Dostoevsky's book, The Brothers Karamazov, where the three brothers, born to the same father, develop distinct characteristics that ultimately set them apart. Fyodor Pavlovich Karamazov, the father of the three brothers, serves as the embodiment of moral depravity, and his neglectfulness towards his son leaves emotional scars and plays a significant role in shaping their destinies as they are forced to grow up in different environments. Alyosha, the youngest of the three sons, was raised under the Christian influence at the local monastery. Following his mother's passing, Alyosha was sent to live with the monks in the monastery, where Elder Zosima's teachings shaped his character with teachings of love, compassion, and humility. Alyosha was sheltered from his father's vices and grew up in an atmosphere of religious devotion which caused him to develop a deep sense of inner peace, a trait not found in the rest of the Karamazovs. In contrast to Alyosha, Ivan, the second son, was raised with a strong intellectual background, causing him to develop existential doubts and a nihilistic outlook on life. He was raised in an environment where intellectual development was prioritized over emotional growth, leading him to mature into a figure utterly different from his younger brothers, seeking the truth through reasoning alone and ultimately rejecting any spiritual or religious explanations for human suffering. Although all three brothers experienced parental neglect from their father, Dmitri experienced this neglect more on a deeper level as he faced physical and mental abuse. Not having a monastery to take him in or an intellectual upbringing, Dmitri was forced into relying on his emotional impulses, which negative consequences can be witnessed in a troubling love triangle with Katerina Ivanova and Grushenka, which displays his need for emotional validation and his struggle to find genuine self-worth outside of his destructive passions. The three brothers all share the same father and were deprived of maternal love because their mothers passed on early. But through distinct upbringings and different philosophies, they developed highly contrasting characters, demonstrating the power of nurture and personal choice over nature. In his book, The Picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde further develops the idea of influence and moral choices being more consequential. At the outset of the novel, Dorian Gray, the protagonist, is characterized as someone with an untarnished soul and idealistic purity, though somewhat also naive. This initial character description could not predict his actions later in the story. Although his early life is left relatively unformed, his impressionability mirrors the idea of tabula rasa, or blank slate, and on this blank slate is where Lord Henry Wotton, a character with a troubling moral compass, pushes Dorian towards immorality. His introduction of Dorian to hedonism and his emphasis on beauty's superficiality lead him down a rabbit hole of self-obsession. Dorian becomes obsessed with his looks to a point of murdering his own old friend and causing the death of his lover. Dorian, who was once an innocent, loving character, becomes a superficial man whose only source of self-worth becomes his physical beauty, disregarding what anyone thinks of him. His blank slate is tarnished by the influence of Lord Henry, demonstrating that nature, while not leading a character to his doom, does not save the character, ultimately demonstrating the power of influence and personal choice. While people may inherit tendencies towards certain behaviors like Cal Trask from his parents, they're not doomed as in the case of Alyosha, nor saved by their nature as in the case of Dorian. Their outcomes in life are a product of their nurture and personal decisions. Thank you.
Up next, Emily.
Imagine you're finally nearing the end of your favorite horror film. All the suspense built up is now sitting in a pit at the bottom of your stomach as the plot begins to unfold into a battle between good and evil. And suddenly, watching, you start to question humanity and what makes the difference between good and evil within us. This debate is often referred to as nature versus nurture, which debates whether our genetic inheritance or environmental factors have a larger impact on human behavior and development. This is a common controversial topic in psychology and literature where often only one side is argued, but our transformation into the person we later become, whether good or evil, is not solely determined by nature or nurture. Nurture is the foundation of our behavior and traits, yet nature is the foundation of our behavior and traits, yet nurture is what guides the development of these innate qualities long term. For decades, this has been an ongoing debate in literature stemming back to one of the first famous novels exploring this idea, written by Mary Shelley in 1818, Frankenstein. Shelley uses a mad scientist's ambition to unlock the secrets of man through scientific experiments to create a man-made creature that embodies the complexity of the collaboration between nature and nurture, whom we now refer to as Frankenstein's monster. When the scientist Victor Frankenstein is finally successful in creating a living being made of reanimated body parts, he is just a blank slate with only innate behaviors and traits. Like an undeveloped child, he longs for acceptance, companionship, and love. Yet his only companion, Victor Frankenstein, being highly unhappy with the appearance of his creation, abandons him. And later, he is met with even worse rejection and cruelty from society, causing him to go from an innocent, pure creature to a murderous, resentful being. The creature quickly becomes a monster because of the hostile environment he was brought into, causing the innate evil within him to influence his actions. And although Frankenstein devotes his existence to seeking revenge on the factors that fueled his evil, his initial nature is still revealed in the end when he visits Victor Frankenstein's resting place and confesses to all his regret of his savagery over the years. Attachment is key when it comes to normal development, and with this being ripped away by Victor when he abandons Frankenstein at such an early age, it ultimately influences the deterioration of the monster's progression before any environmental factors even amplify his resentful behavior. But this attachment is still present inside of Frankenstein even after all those years of hate and violence, as displayed through his decision to take his own life in the end because he had no one left with Victor being gone. Nature, or lack thereof, may have influenced a large portion of Frankenstein's doings, but innate tendencies still prevailed in the end, highlighting the interplay between the two. Nature and nurture interchange, which plays a larger role in the influence of our evolution at various periods throughout our life, making it impossible for one to ultimately decide what shapes us as humans. Nature is essential during the younger years of age, where our inherited genes play a huge part in physical and mental abilities, but nurture is what helps further develop these traits and shape them into long-term tendencies. These ideas are effectively displayed in William Golding's 1954 novel, Lord of the Flies. The novel is about a group of young schoolboys stranded on an island alone, where any form of structure and societal expectations are now non-existent. Innate survival instincts and behaviors initially take over, enabling them to stay alive, but due to the lack of structure, the boys' community they formed on the island quickly deteriorates into a hostile, tense environment. As seen with Frankenstein, often the environment we're presented with corresponds with the good or evil we choose to live our life by. Yet, good and evil aren't learned traits. They are innate qualities that aid in human development, and when prompted by our environmental factors, they can heavily influence one's personality. When the schoolboys first arrived at the island, they weren't acting as the savages they are in the end, but evil is an acquired trait. And when presented with such an aggressive environment, it largely impacts their actions, eventually driving them to kill one of their own. The boys' quick change in behavior shows that good and evil are not learned. They're acquired, yet environmental factors are what provokes the appearance of these qualities through our behavior, further exemplifying the complex interplay between nature and nurture. For so long, we focused on comparing nature and nurture to attempt to decide which one ultimately determines the course of human habits and development, yet both aid in our growth, with nature lying as the framework of our existence and nurture further shaping these qualities into more permanent personality. In literature, readers can identify patterns of the complex collaboration between genetic inheritance and outside factors, proving that there isn't one clear answer to this controversial topic. So as many psychologists have now ruled, the philosophical debate, nature versus nurture, is highly inaccurate because it's not a matter of which one influences human development and evolution, but rather a matter of how they work together to shape who we become. The more accurate understanding of the relationship between the influence of our genetic and environmental factors is now known as nature via nurture. Ultimately, this proves that nature is the ruling basis of our behavior and development, and nurture is the mold that gradually shapes the person we later become. Thank you.
Imagine a fresh, untouched sheet of blank computer paper. Left undisturbed, the paper will stay the same. Clean, crisp, white. Perfect. It will remain in its original form as long as its surroundings do not affect it. But now, imagine handing that paper to a class of children told to do as they wish with it. Some may draw pictures on it. Others may scribble, fold, or tear it. The paper alone is unchanged, but left to these conditions, it can easily be manipulated. Just like paper, humans are products of their environment. We, too, can be manipulated by the situations and people around us. These behavioral changes are not random, but arise from the ever-changing conditions of the world around us. Though the debate of whether our nature or nurture shapes us is ongoing, examples from literature prove that we can see how our nurtured environment impacts us much more than our innate nature. While human nature can define our external appearance and influence the physiological parts of our being, nurture truly determines our personalities and behavior. A prime example of this environmental molding is Ebenezer Scrooge. In the 1843 novella A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens, Scrooge is described as a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, a squeezing, wrenching, grasping, scraping, clutching, covetous old sinner. Scrooge is known to be a prideful, selfish old man who overworks his employees and keeps his money to himself. But why was Scrooge the way he was? The Ghost of Christmas Past shows that Scrooge experienced poverty, a strict childhood, and lost love. These events shaped Scrooge's childhood and early adulthood, resulting in his cold heart and obsession with wealth. Since his circumstances remained unchanging, his behavior stayed stagnant. After visits from the ghost, which show Scrooge the potential of his actions, he immediately experiences a change of heart and becomes kind and generous to his employees and others around him. He promises, "I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will not shut out the lessons that the spirits teach." If Scrooge had not been shown the consequences of his actions, he would have continued being callous and unkind. Scrooge's behavior transformation shows how we adapt to our surroundings and how our experiences shape us and form our character. He quickly turns from the cruel, villainous employer to the heroic savior of the Cratchits. Scrooge's harsh environment nurtured his selfishness and prideful behavior, while the ghost developed him into a kind and giving individual. Stepping away from Scrooge, let's look at another example about how the way we are nurtured affects our behavior. In Genesis, the Bible's first book, Adam and Eve roam freely throughout the Garden of Eden, being told by God, "Of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge and good of evil thou shalt not eat of it." They were carefree, obedient, and trusting. As long as their surroundings remained unchanged, their actions reflected this tranquility. However, when their environment shifted with the arrival of Satan in the form of a serpent, Eve's behavior changed. Eve defied God by eating the fruit and gained newfound knowledge, which led her to feel shame. This change in her behavior highlights how her environment directly influenced her actions and understanding of the world. Though Eve was not seen as a villain initially, she quickly became one after being influenced negatively by her environment. The tree's fruit symbolizes the change in human behavior when knowledge is gained. Our characteristics are not rigid, but rather easily adjustable depending on our current situation. Environmental factors affect not only adults, but also children, who are still developing and have a poor perception of life. Tori Hayden's 1980 memoir, One Child, tells the story of Sheila, a 6-year-old girl who was abandoned, hurt, neglected, and abused. Sheila was placed in Tori's special education class with other disturbed children, but refused to participate or form relationships. Tori describes that, deep down behind those hostile eyes was a very little girl who had already learned that life really isn't much fun for anybody, and the best way to avoid further rejection was to make herself as objectionable as possible. All her life, Sheila had only known hate, so she violently closed herself off and became unlovable to avoid getting hurt. She had been taught hatred and anger, so she in turn reflected these emotions. Her disturbing upbringing only inflicted bitterness and resentment. But once she attended Tori's class, Sheila slowly learned how to interact with others, be cared for, and eventually how to love. When Tori brings in flowers and allows Sheila to keep one, she whispers, "My heart do be so big. It be so big and I do reckon I be about the happiest kid for it." Through Tori's love, compassion, and inclusive classroom, Sheila learned to open up and discover the world around her. Her violence became empathy, her anger turned to joy, and her hatred melted into love. As Sheila's environment and the people in it changed, her character shifted to match it, and she formed a whole new image of herself. This conveys that even from a young age, humans use their experiences and the emotions surrounding them to form their identity. This identity creates behaviors that best allow them to survive in their environment. Her transformation highlights how a shift in one's surrounding atmosphere can reshape not only behavior, but one's entire sense of self. By recognizing the significant role that nurture plays in shaping behavior, we gain a deeper understanding of the diverse experiences that influence individual identities. Human nature may form the foundation of a person, but it is their environment and nurture that is given or withheld that molds their character. This interaction between nature and nurture explains why people from different backgrounds are uniquely shaped by the experiences throughout their lives.
Up next, Lily.
What shapes us into the members of society we become? Is our fate predetermined, or do we have control over our inescapable future? That is the question we as a society have pondered extensively since the start of our existence. Although we would like to believe that our surroundings have little to no effect on us as people, that is unavoidable. It is inevitable that certain traits and features of ourselves stem from our nature, our DNA. However, we have control over the extent to which these aspects affect us. As P.J. Sheetal argues in his poem, Nature vs. Nurture, that we are who we are because of our surroundings and our genetics, but we do have a choice about the person we will become. Although you can't directly control how you were raised, you can control what you take away from your experiences that shape who you are. The life you were born into works as a foundation for the life you will create. The 2018 novel Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens explores the internal conflicts of Kaya, a young girl forced to live alone after being abandoned by her family. She grows up living in the marshlands where nature has nurtured, tutored, and protected her when no one else would. She is content with her life having nature as her main source of comfort, but it prevents her from forming any perspective on the world outside the marsh. Being isolated from the town her whole life, the only basis she has for adulthood is the semblance of her parents' relationship before the fallout. From a child's early perspective, she views her parents as simply her mother and father. However, as she grows older, she is exposed to the reality of the mental and physical ways her father abuses her mother. This exposure leads her to have false expectations of how men should treat women, leading her to be more susceptible to similar abuse in the future. Once she reaches late adolescence, she is met with Chase Andrews, her almost polar opposite. So when he comes across a young girl ostracized from the town, he becomes wildly obsessed with the idea of being able to control and manipulate her, exactly how Kaya's father had done to her mother. Kaya is originally blind to this, but she begins to realize the resemblance between Chase and her father, so she takes matters into her own hands and breaks the cycle. She realizes the way she was nurtured to believe that it was normal for men to take advantage of their power against women, so instead of giving in to her fate, she decides for herself what her life will look like. She makes the choice to protect herself by any means necessary and prioritize her own well-being. Despite having admired her mother greatly, she takes her mistake of abandoning her family and uses that as motivation to make better choices. She doesn't run. She protects her family's land, establishes her career, and above all, discovers who she is. She is proof that no matter what life you are born into, you decide the life you will make for yourself. Little Women, the 1868 novel by Louisa May Alcott, follows Jo, a young girl raised in a time where women are expected to suppress their abilities to simply be a wife and mother. Jo is nurtured through her childhood on how to raise a home alongside her three sisters. Jo resembles the type of woman during the 19th century who struggle to push back against the societal expectations that are placed upon them. Throughout her quest of self-discovery, she is faced with numerous challenges and judgments from her community, but she is determined to not let the ideal she was born into control the idea of what she could be. Jo is for the most part uninterested in finding love and more invested in the idea that she can be an influential writer. She doesn't want to be a product of society, but rather a working member of the people shaping the dynamics of society. Her ambitions and persistence are her way of establishing her individuality despite how she is brought up. As her siblings marry off and start families, she continues writing and forging her own path in creating a world where women are no longer defined by their marital status. As she protests, "I'm not ambitious for a splendid fortune, but I do long to be the master of my own fate." Despite being brought up in a world where it is predetermined what her future looks like, she uses that as motivation to change the expectations placed on young women. Alcott's novel was ahead of its time, paving the way for women to control what parts of their nurture they apply to themselves, while also having the freedom to create their own identity. Although Jo is raised to live a certain way, She literally and figuratively writes her own story, where she can be defined not by who she marries or how many kids she has, but by her career as a writer. It is hard to feel in control of something that feels already decided for you, like being born into a certain life determines the limits of who you can be, but we have the power to change that. Like Joe and Kaya, you have the power to write your own story. You can decide to take the life you are given and make it your own, because despite your nature being decided for you, you decide what you take away from your nature that shapes what your future can be. Thank you.
Up next, Kaylani.
The environment of a person's upbringing and their genetics are widely considered to determine who a person is. What most people wonder, though, is it just a person's nature or their nurture, the way they are treated, that makes them who they are? Donna Tartt's novels, The Secret History and The Goldfinch, explore nature and nurture with differing storylines. Each examines a character whose fate is intricately intertwined to their inherent traits and the environments explored. Richard Papin in His Secret History and Theo Decker in The Goldfinch prove with their backgrounds, decisions, and eventual fates that it is not only nature or nurture, but it is both factors that create a person. Richard Papin, the protagonist of the novel The Secret History, has a life shaped by his nature and environment. Richard is raised in the ordinary suburban town of Plato, California. He consistently longs for a purpose in life, to ascend from his ordinary and mundane environment. After seeing a pamphlet about Hampden College in Vermont, his aspirations grow deeper and he begins attending the school in hopes of chasing an intellectual stimulation he desires. Richard's arrival at Hampden marks the beginning of a new environment that provides greater opportunities of intellectual challenge and social status he craves. However, the challenges of social prestige and the complexities of his nature collide and influence his life. His yearning for pure beauty is distracted by a group of carefree elite students. This group has a close relationship to the study of classics and endeavors in dead languages and practices of the classics' nature, which is far from the environment that Richard grew up in. As Richard begins to engage further into the classics and this particular group of students, he is in both an intellectually stimulating and dangerous situation. His curiosity and vulnerability makes him a victim to the group's darker influences, including an eventual involvement in murder. Richard's nature of longing for something more than what he once had is now interacting with his new environment of Hampden. This eventually leads him to blindly disregarding morals and asceticism. The influence of his peers subconsciously shapes his decisions, finding himself swept in a world of secrets, manipulation, and crime. The Secret History is set in Richard's point of view, which through further analysis can credit him as an unreliable narrator. Readers need to understand that Richard's longing for anything greater than an ordinary life has caused him to romanticize his life. The murder he witnesses, the conflicts he finds himself in, and the difference in social status shown through his relationships with the new people he has befriended are all romanticized to seem more beautiful than they are. In The Secret History, Tartt suggests that the connection between nature versus nurture is not a straight line. Richard's intellectual nature leads him to Hampden in search of a more interesting life. Only the environment leads him to his moral demise. His fate, both influenced by his nature and environment, is shown to be responsible for his tragic outcome. Theo Decker, the protagonist of the novel The Goldfinch, also shows the interlinking of nature and environments through differing contexts. Theo is a young boy who lives in New York who unfortunately loses his mother in a terrorist attack at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. This traumatic event sets off a series of events that will ultimately define his fate in life. Theo's natural traits include his sensitivity, intelligence, and artistic aspirations. Before the bombing, he is a quiet kid who finds comfort in art and beauty through a close relationship with his mother. After the bombing, Theo is lost and is thrown into an environment of instability and emotional neglect. His neglectful father and his guardians, the Barbers, provide no emotional support for Theo after his traumatic experience of losing his mother. This leaves Theo to navigate his grief and confusion alone. Unfortunately for him, his nature inclines him towards emotional depth, making it extremely difficult to move past the trauma, and he becomes isolated as he grows older. After the bombing, Theo is immersed into the art world as he steals the painting, The Goldfinch. This environment deepens his artistic aspirations, but also exposes him to deeper aspects of life, such as crime, addiction, and lost morality. Similar to Richard, Theo's fate is shaped by the new character's environments he interacts with. His relationship with a new friend, Boris, introduces him to a dangerous lifestyle of crime, drugs, and the keys to surviving an isolated life. Though Theo's vulnerability makes him susceptible to the allure of Boris's chaotic lifestyle, his love of art and the memory of his mother have deeply rooted themselves into Theo's life. Theo's fate is not only defined by the traumatic losses he suffers, but also by the people and environments he is placed in. His nurture finds himself in a world of addiction and violence, yet also maintaining his natural gift of artistic intellect. His fate is significantly influenced by the difficulty of survival in these new environments and his natural love of art. Both The Secret History and The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt illustrate the complexity of whether it is a person's nature or their environment that shapes a person's fate. Only through the analysis of the two novels is it clear that it's both a person's nature and environment that determine fate. One simple decision or an event can transform a person's morals and a way of life. Richard Papin's fate is determined by his intellectual nature and the morally compromised environment he immerses himself in. Theo Decker's fate is deeply impacted by the loss of his mother and the following chain of events he is exposed to, yet his emotional intelligence and artistic nature provide a deep staple in the chaos that ensues around him. Donna Tartt demonstrates that the forces of nature and nurture cannot be distinguished separately. Instead, they are in constant conversation with one another. Thank you.
It was not an easy job for the judges tonight, and I do not blame them. I'm going to call up each of the contestants in the order that they competed. This is not the prizes yet. Just to give you all a chance to come up here, stand together, and we'll have you line up. Then I'll start with the tie for 6th place, go to the winner, and we'll, of course, take a group photo. So parents can come up and do that. So, in the order that they spoke, Jax Leduc. These are not checks yet. They'll get their checks later, but they Kat Minnie. Luciana Burns. Mohammed Assad. Emily Trink. Corinne Medford. Lily O'Connell. And Kaylani Farrell. I'm going to build this suspense for a minute. Congratulations to all of you. As their teacher, I heard almost 30 speeches for this prompt, and it was easy to narrow it down to these 8 contestants, plus our alternate, Katie McPartland, who I'd like to thank for being on standby if somebody couldn't participate tonight. She also did a great job. I heard in the the library from a lot of parents and family members that this would be something they couldn't do or couldn't imagine doing as seniors in high school, and I have the same feeling. I think a lot of teachers do. It takes so much practice to be as brave as they were tonight, and not only speak in front of people, but read their own words that they took so much time in thinking about and molding into this essay. So I'm very proud of you. I know the whole staff is, so thank you so much. They changed some of the amounts around for ties, which I think is great. In a tie, in no particular order at all, in sixth place, receiving $200, Lily O'Connell. Kaylani Farrell. And Muhammad Assad. In fifth place, with a prize of $300, Jax Leduc. We are going to have a tie for fourth place, no third place. So tied for fourth with $650 each, Corinne Medford and Kat Minnie. So our second place, and then first place will be pretty obvious. Second place with a prize of $1,050, Emily Trank. Which means the winner of the 2025 Spellman Oratorical is Luciana Byrne. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. Thank you for your patience and your respect for these students. It was wonderful. And beginning of senior year for them, so a lot more great events coming up. Thank you all so much.